So as I've been doing in my previous introductions and just quickly talking about what First Second's doing in tandem with our artists, I talked about really kicking off our projects, getting on the same page with the creator's vision, knowing how every project is going to be unique, and then working with our creators to rough out our story and create thumbnails, iron out what the final look is going to be like for our art. And then now our creators are diving into final art. And at this point, we're kind of on the home stretch, because by the time when we get color and lettered artwork, my incredible design team kicks into gear to start constructing the book itself. And we're taking all the components that have been created up to this point, piece it all together, and we're designing basically the whole interior of the book. So what are those pages? Basically the front matter and the back matter of the book. And what's the front matter and the back matter of the book? It's a good question. The front matter are the pages in the front of the book, like the title page, the copyright page, the dedications. Ooh, visuals, yay.
Yeah, we're a visual.
Exactly.
I do think it's interesting.
Oh, that was awesome.
First Second puts a lot of like what would typically be the very back of the book.
Exactly, because
but I know that's just probably something that has been done since the inception of First Second.
Well, why have rules if you can't break them? And then the back matter, as Ngozi was saying, is like typically or traditionally it could be like activities, it could be like an author's note, and a lot of times for First Second, we'll throw a copyright back there because why not? And when my team gets all the final art, we now have a complete book experience. So now we can really design to that experience that the creators work so hard to develop. And sometimes there's a strong graphical theme we can draw influence on. Other times there's a strong metaphor that we can run with. But when we're designing the front and back matter, I like to think of them as the opening and ending credits to a film. And, you know, where like a good credit's not snapping you out of the experience of the movie. But once we have these pages designed, the book is ready to start routing. And when the rest of the this is where the rest of the First Second team is jumping in, the managing editors, the copy editors, the production managers, marketing, promotions, sales, schools and library reps, everybody just starts ramping up. But before any of that, we have to have our art colored. It has to be lettered and it has to go beyond. And to speak about the final stages of developing the artwork, I'm thrilled to introduce Ngozi Ukazu, author of the mega popular webcomic turned graphic novel series, Check Please, a hilarious and stirring coming-of-age story about hockey bros trying to find yourself during the best years of your life.
This is such an interesting session that you bring to the table. Color and beyond. I'm going to ask you about the beyond because I feel like that's the packaging of the book. That's the figuring out the cover, finding. And you weren't art director when I was creating these two books, but I mean, you obviously have a ton of experience on this stuff. It's I almost feel like it's like fine tuning that beyond part. It's a lot of just careful.
Yeah.
How are you showcasing this story to the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's absolutely fair. And, you know, and we could almost, and especially with your experience, we could, you know, lump in beyond for some of our creators who are creating their comics on their own. Like, you know, how can they promote their books? Like, and because you have such amazing experience on that front.
Yeah, it's really like I'll go ahead and talk about the coloring and lettering, which I think is an interesting part. It is definitely in that you know, like process comics. It is a necessary part, but it is a lot of comes comic making. So all I have are a bunch of examples of how I color my pages, and we'll jump in. And
I love it.
So let's go to the next.
Yay.
Yay. So here I have two examples of work looks like when it's full colored. There's no lettering on this page. I took it off. But I honestly think that one of the modern coloring books is called Color and Light by James Deity in painting. But I feel like most dealing with light and dealing with how the characters are interacting with the light, how the background is interacting with the light. I have these, I wanted to show this page, which is from Sticks and Scones, my new book. But it shows like an interior shot where the light is having all this fun time coming in through the front door, bouncing up into the ceiling, hitting all these boxes. And then you have another scene where the characters are outside about to hop in one of my characters, his cherry red Jeep, and you get nice ambient lighting and some atmospheric perspective with those like buildings in the back being pushed back with they're a little bit desaturated. So yeah, that's just one example. And I think on the next slide.
And really quick though, too, you did such a phenomenal job with that lighting in the hallway. It's you really can your brain is translating that to a specific time of day. It's really quite stunning.
Yeah, I think that's the goal. When you're doing lighting, it's not just about, I mean, like, I guess layer one is just making sure the light is like hitting in the right spot. Like even right now, like right on my face is, you know, it's under my chin. It's a little dark because no light can get to the area. But the next step is saying like, I want to make this feel like an afternoon. I want to make this feel like a nostalgic afternoon. Make this feel like like a warm summer night. That's something else. So here's like I'm just pulling out examples. Another example is I'm not outside shots because nature is very difficult. But I wanted to draw kind of like a New England. You can make the maybe this is afternoon, but just drawing snow is really snow kind of reflects light and bounces it. Where are you from?
Yeah. I'm in Brooklyn and I grew up in Massachusetts. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it's college and it's so like there's such a specific feeling of the morning or afternoon, like after it snows, cloud in the sky, and the like white of reflecting so much light everywhere. It feels a little, it can feel a little magical. So I wanted Jack's run with this character George to have that same feel. So lots of blues and then white. And nice.
Sorry, your audio just blipped out there a little bit.
We can go to the next slide.
Okay.
I apologize that my audio is cutting in and out.
Oh, it's okay.
Okay, but yeah, so I'm actually teaching a workshop on this summer, so I'm always very excited to talk about color.
Oh, great! That's awesome.
And what was that?
Oh no, I was saying that's great.
Oh yeah, it's really exciting. And especially in this like latest volume of Check Please, I wanted to take some risk and I wanted to play around with color. One of my coloring idols is a guy named Matt Wilson, who, if you know about superhero comics, you know that he's often paired with an Eisner Award-winning colorist. I actually I got a portfolio review from him. We were at the same festival. I handed him a copy of Check Please, and he flipped through it and he gave me feedback on my colors. And one thing that he said is that I often sometimes rely too much on literal coloring, where, you know, the grass is green and the clouds are white and the tree is brown. So with this last year, trying to push that. So in this scene, we have 2 pages from this comic, Whiskey, which is about this character who's very secretive and mysterious. Like Biddy finds him at a crazy wild party and he is doing something unexpected. The first panel panel is this warm foreground, and the background is totally desaturated, which is unrealistic, you know.
Right.
And be the same. And then at the party, you get to play with all this fun lighting. So I just wanted to make everything feel really warm and like study college, and that was fun as well. Yeah. So even like the foreground, it's like more purple, and the background is very.
What's interesting, the color holds, you know, like in the line work as well. So you're taking the ink work, and then you're applying that color to it, and then that really recedes everything to the background. So with that beautifully washed out background, our focus is just completely to our guy in the foreground, and actually, and then vice versa, you know, where we have our, you know, character in the foreground, just in the shadow, you know, she's kind of receding and not as noticeable, but with these like beautiful color hold lines and saturated colors in the background. So it's really, really quite beautiful.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned because I didn't start using until, you know, around this time in the comic, around like the second book of Check Please. And I think it helps, it really, all color holding is, for anybody listening in, is when you take the usually black, or you make it a dark purple or a dark red, a sky blue. And what that does is it kind of lets you like push colors to the forefront and just helps in directing the eye of the reader to go wherever you want it to go. So yeah, you can see that like I'm just kind of planning out the story and composition here. And I'm gonna pick one of these thumbnails, and we're gonna enlarge it on the next slide. And this is gonna be the like crazy, like almost illegible sketch that kind of on this, like you'll see, like it's not really legible. These are the thumbnails. So some people call them pencils, some people call them roughs, but it's getting closer and closer scene where Biddy checks someone for like the very first time. After you draw pencils, and just I think you questions, but on the next slide, you'll see that pencils, they become inks or line art, like we'll call them many different things. And this is where like I actually start process. So I had a lot of help in making this book. Many people who is called a flatter, and they're the person who colors. And you can see what he sent back to me, which are just everything blocked out. So we know that Biddy has a different jersey from his opponent. The background is blocked out, so that when I go into photo, the main program that I use, I'm just clicking. It's easy for me to click things because the flatter has already visually organized everything for me. So is actually just showing the colors kind of coming together a bit more. It's going from flats to rendering the foreground and background, but it's in this situation I'm thinking about, this is where the lighting starts coming in. I'm like, okay, from the top with, you know, diffuse soft light. This is hard light. This is hard lines. So I mean, where Biddy's shoulder, like the red on his shoulder is going to be a lot lighter than the red on his back. And in the next slide, we kind of get everything coming together because I moved to the background a bit more. This is totally finished at this point because not only is the background drawn, there's also a gradient layer over everything. Like you can, like just like there's that, you can see like a knee in the upper left hand corner. There's a color hold on that to make it kind of fade forward to the front. And yeah, it's done. And the goal here is intensity, brightness, wham, bam, pow. Okay.
And so when you're working at the beginning, so what do you how are you starting to think about color? Do you organize your thoughts in any way? Mood boards, research, like even like a Pinterest board or anything like that?
That's a really good question. And at the end of this process, I will show that I have a swatch set that I use that I usually color pick from. But when I'm thinking about color, and I want to break away from it. It's almost very literal. I'm just like,
Right.
I look at a reference picture of a hockey rink, and I'm like, okay, that's what I'll use. Whereas with like some of the that I showed, I had to look up references for parties to be able to that scene at the party. I'm like, okay, what were the HBO series Euphoria, where you could be at a party and colors don't matter anymore. Like everything could be green, everything could be like neat. I look for a feel and try to replicate that.
Nice. And in terms of, have you ever had a...
Definitely.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so these are the swatches that I was referring to. And these swatches, it's basically, it speeds up the process of coloring. And all throughout Check Please, the colors are pretty consistent, even though my character designs all over the place. The color's pretty consistent because I'm always picking the same, the color for Samuel Red is like hex or hashtag 8400 going to be that color. So, and I think we can probably just keep going to other slides too. Oh, my camera got paused. Oops. As long as people can still hear me, I think my camera was paused, but if people can still hear me, then I think we're good.
Yeah, we're here. Every once in a while, your audio blips out, but it's coming through.
Okay, I will speak slowly and enunciate so that the audio clipping is not that bad. So here's another example of the coloring process. And here I'm showing the final page, and we're gonna go right back to the thumbs and work through them to the finished process project just again. So I believe, which again are very, very rough. I just want to block out the paneling and also the are. And then on the next slide, we have the pencils. And the pencils, we actually get to see in. I'm figuring out emotional beats here, doing a lot of erasing and redrawing. The next slide after that, it is the ink. And I actually really enjoy inking because it's when everything kind of starts to cook. It's almost like you're cooking these ingredients and everything comes together. And then after that, we have the flats, I believe, on the next slide. And these flats are truer to the final rendered image. Like in this case, there's no lighting. It's just the skin tone of the characters, the colors of the background. And the fun part for me, and when I do live streams, my readers often note that everything starts to come alive more when the next slide, which is when everything is rendered. We find out a light source. And in this case, this character Whiskey, who we saw at that party doing something mysterious, he is shrouded in shadow. So not have a fun moment of picking out a light source, we also get to add a little bit of narrative to his story because it's shrouded in shadow. And yeah, so it's very fun moving all the way from thumbnails to something that tells a strong story.
So I have to ask, when I'm looking at your early sketches, moving on to your final renders, uh, I have to applaud your spatial sense, because, I'm not seeing speech bubbles or spaces for the text, and so I feel like is that all in your head? Are you kind of imagining the text and you're kind of working, or are you factoring in that? When are you factoring in that?
And I didn't factor it in at all. This was before I'd gone to art school. And now I actually have layers, which I have taken off
Okay.
on my thumbnail bubbles. And I do this process where I take my thumbnails and I drop them directly into InDesign. That's where I letter everything first so that you can read through the comic in its thumbnail form. And I just kind of remember that when I go back to pencil everything down in Photoshop. So it took me a long process, a long time, but I finally figured out space for the lettering so that people can read the comic.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, that's it. I love that you're using InDesign. I am such a huge proponent of it. I mean, because we're ultimately moving it over there anyways, and it's such a great place for that text to live. The text is very happy in text world, so in the InDesign world. So
yeah.
So
InDesign is a program that I started using in high school, and I had no idea that I would be using it every day in my actual career. So anyone else, it's beneficial. It's a skill.
That's awesome. And
I have a screen cap line in the very next slide.
Oh, yay.
Yes.
Oh, look at that. That was a nice segue. Oh, rock on.
Yeah, very good segue. So here's a screen cap of the lettering for this page. The process that we did, I believe, is I had a letterer who lettered everything. I lettered the first like 40 or 50 Check Please comics, but because we're in a time sensitive project, we brought a letterer in to help letter my pages. But when we sent everything as that first second, it had to be relettered so that it could fit the first second format. So everything's been lettered like 2 or 3. But this is like in InDesign, that's all it is. It's a bunch of shapes and a bunch of text boxes over the art. And I think the next slide actually is a zoom out to show how the workspace looks like when I'm actually lettering a comic.
And for folks in the audience that is not aware of the benefit of InDesign, what's great about InDesign is it allows the text to live in one place. So we're keeping our text and our art separate. So I do have a question. I was going to inject it, but I don't. If you have another slide, let's definitely plug into that.
I think that might be the last slide, unless there's a thank you slide.
Oh, okay. So to kind of loop in the beyond, if you will, you managed to overcome, like when you were working on Check Please, I feel like you managed to overcome like one of the most difficult hurdles for any comic artist, which is like really getting your comics in the hands of the readers. Really, what was, how did you do that? Like what was the your methodology?
Oh my goodness. I almost want to run into my storage room in the back because I was cleaning it out just yesterday, and I found these little like computer paper cutouts that had like the main character Biddy's face on it. It had like, hey, check please, check out this comic. They had the URL. And that's conventions. I would, the day before convention, print out, I don't know, 20, 30 pages.
What do you want? I don't
like page and just, and then send them to people. So,
whatever you guys want to do. I don't care.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
That's real. I like promoting the comic just because I often say that I was the first fan of Check Please. I treated it like I was in a fandom and that I wanted this weird hockey baking TV show that I was a fan of. So I just shared it that way.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, I feel like we have a few minutes left, and I wanted to get a couple audience questions over to you. We have a question from Katie, which is, did it change how you moved forward with Check Please once you knew how we were all just as deeply invested as you were?
Oh, that's a really good question. That's a very sweet question. I think that I'll say it was kind of like this, where I was just going at full speed. I was going crazy and nuts, just tossing the story out there, like devil may care attitude. And then I realized that people were starting to become invested and care about it. And that caused me, I think, to slow down a little bit, to think about, you know, what these characters are doing, and how the readers will affect it. And it also made me a little scared and paralyzed as a creator, because I was thinking now, like, oh no, if I do this, will people get upset? Oh, if I do that, will, you know, someone on Tumblr go, ah.
Yeah.
But I kind of came out, so out of that dip, I now know that the story is for the characters and the story is for the story itself. You know, as it art gratis art. So it's art for the sake of art. And as long as I'm being true to that, it's good for me, it's good for the characters, and it's also good for the readers. So that's a good question.
That was actually a great one. And we have a question from Haley, and her question is, how do I know if I'm being original?
That's a great question. Originality is specificity. And the funny, most ironic thing is that the more specific you are in your story and the more it speaks to you, the more it's going to speak to everyone while still being original. And I mean, I kind of get that quote from Bong Joon-ho, who himself, I think, was quoting Martin Scorsese. But he was just telling this very specific story about class in Korea, yet the world. So just as long as you're making it this specific story and what you want to tell, it's be unique to you.
That's awesome. Well, Ngozi, thank you so much. This has been so much fun. And I'm sorry we had our little technical difficulties, but this has been an absolute blast.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was so fun.